Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Well, earlier we had the chance to talk to the Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate running against the sitting U.S. Senator, Jeff Merkley from the state of Oregon, Monica Wehby, Dr. Monica Wehby. And I think you'll find our time together to be pretty interesting. So join me now as we talk to Dr. Monica Wehby. What a delight today to have in the studio with us Monica Wehby, Dr. Monica Wehby. She is the Republican candidate running against sitting Senator Jeff Merkley, U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley, and we're delighted to have you here. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
You surviving?
Oh, yeah, we're having a great time.
Did you ever expect all of this when you joined in?
It's been crazy. It's been very busy. We're doing our last swing around the state now. We're going everywhere in this last 10 days. And this third day of our trip, we went to Salem yesterday. We started out in Portland, Salem, did a great event last night with at the GOP office.
Good for you.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
So let's go back to the beginning. Why are you doing this? You're a very accomplished physician, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
But to go from that into politics is quite the leap.
Well, you know, I've been involved in medical politics for about 30 years and been president of our medical association here in Portland Medical Society, Oregon Medical Association, and involved at the national level, AMA and all, National Neurosurgery, but actually ran our tort reform campaign. Do you remember that? Measure
Yes.
35 back
Yes.
in 2004? Wow. Yeah, so we were trying to get the cap on non-economic damages because we were losing our doctors. Right. So I've been involved quite a bit in the past. In 2009, when they were trying to push the Obamacare legislation through, was involved trying to make that better even back in 2009. So I've been working on that for years. But the main reason I decided to run now was because I honestly felt like I could help. You know, I talk about a little brain tumor patient I had that gave me a thank you note that said, if we're not here to make life better for one another, then what's the point? And I've always tried my whole life to make things better and to use whatever talent or ability that I had to try to make things better. And things are going in the wrong direction now, and I figured I could just complain about it or try to get out there and change it.
All right, so how much of Obamacare and the failure of Cover Oregon was your motivation?
Well, I thought that this was a great opportunity and a great time to get in. If I was ever going to try to run, that now was the time, because healthcare is such a big issue right now. And I've been working on that for, like I said, for decades, trying to have high quality, affordable care for everybody. And that's the goal of the healthcare law, but it's not what we're seeing. You know, everybody got thrown off their plans. You know, 150,000 Oregonians lost their insurance coverage. The prices are going up for everybody. It's a problem.
Well, now we're forced to default to Obamacare, to the federal plan.
Right.
I mean, there's no way out. We haven't signed up one. It's a mess, and everybody's suing everybody.
Right.
Is there any solution to this thing?
I think we need to get back to a patient-centered, free market approach where the doctor and the patient are back in control of their health care. I think if we wanted to expand Medicaid, then we could have expanded Medicaid without throwing the rest of the system into chaos, which is what happened. The problem is that, you know, the government is telling people what they have to buy as opposed to giving people the option. And if we could get back to putting the patient back into control, then that would really make a huge difference.
Senator Merkley, one of the most liberal senators in the Senate, his voting record with Obama is staggering.
98% with his party.
I mean, that's
98.
Unbelievable.
Do you remember when he ran against Gordon Smith back in 2008, and he was saying that he's way too extreme because he votes with Bush 90% of the time. And look what he's doing, 98.
And
98.
we have a we have a presidency and an administration that's in severe meltdown.
Right.
And now we have a governorship that seems to be in meltdown.
Right.
I would assume this is leaning your way.
I'm optimistic, and we're getting a lot of momentum now. And you know, the key issue is jobs and the economy. Here in Medford, gosh, unemployment's 9%, and that's not even counting the people who have just given up and stopped looking for work. And then you're the timber industry here. I mean, Merkley won't even work with Wyden trying to get this the timber industry policy through. Granted, Walden's plan is far superior and much better, but we're not even seeing Senator Merkley get involved in trying to make things better. It's very disappointed. He's really not shown any leadership for anything. What, he's passed one bill in 6 years? You know, he's done nothing to help our community.
He plays ping pong well.
Well, I don't know if he does or not. I don't know. I'd like to challenge him to ping pong.
He dropped the ball on the garage floor.
You know, we couldn't get him to. Somebody was telling me, they said, Monica, since you can't get him to come out and do any debates, you might as well challenge him to a game of ping pong.
Well,
maybe he'll do that.
All right. Senator Merkley reported in Oregonian, the only U.S. senator that's in favor of supporting marijuana. Your response?
Well, all I can say about that is that I'm a pediatric neurosurgeon, so I care a lot about the developing brain. I also am the mom of 4 teenagers, and the concerns I have about medical marijuana, I think there is an indication for medical marijuana. But as far as recreational marijuana, the concerns I have are that it's related to an increase in psychiatric illness. It has been shown to drop IQ by 8 points. I mean, I don't know how many of us have 8 extra IQ points to spare, but it has been shown to do that. Yeah. It's been directly linked to increased motor vehicle accidents. Makes it very difficult for our law enforcement because it's not like alcohol where you can just do a breathalyzer test and know if someone's intoxicated. You have to, check their blood and do a blood draw. It's a difficult situation. If I had my druthers, what I would do would be wait and see what happens in Colorado and Washington, see how it plays out there for a year or two, and let them sort of be the guinea pigs. Well,
it doesn't seem to go well for those 2 states. At the end of the day, isn't it a mind-altering drug?
Yes, but I think I'm more concerned about the permanent injury that it causes to the brain, particularly the young developing brain. But we'll see what the state decides. It's up to the state, and we'll go with whatever they believe. But because it is on the ballot, but as a doctor, I do have some concerns about it.
Several other big issues on the ballot. Measure 92, GMO. It's a labeling issue. I had a physician on my show just a little while ago, Dr. Joel Klein, and we were talking about antibiotics and biotics and all that, and probiotics.
Right.
And I have become a label reader.
Have you? No.
Well, and I actually read the paper of the side effects of prescriptions. I actually read some of that stuff. So it appears this has momentum. It passed down here in Jackson County. It's not the same bill here as it is on the state level, but it is a label issue. Where are you with that?
Well, there are some issues with that bill in that it is going to increase cost for families. I've heard $400 a year or so per household increased cost for the labeling. And the concern I have is that it would be one just in our state. So we would have a different labeling system than the rest of the country, which makes it more difficult and more expensive for our farmers. I think the best answer to something like, and then again, it doesn't even cover all the foods either. So it's not really doing what you want that labeling
it's a different bill than it was in Jackson County.
So this bill doesn't really doesn't label all of food. So it's not really accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish. But the main concern I have about it is the cost that there's going to be for our families with it. But the better answer, I think, would be to allow people to label non-GMO or to label organic, which is a voluntary thing, and people can already do that, and that accomplishes the same goal.
One other quick medical question then we'll take a break. But Ebola.
Yes.
It's serious.
Yes.
And are we handling this okay?
Oh gosh, I would have put in, we called for a travel ban for a non-essential travel ban from West African countries that are involved. Gosh, I believe it was 2 weeks ago that we asked to do that, because it's an infectious disease. It's highly contagious and infectious. And so if you don't, we all know that you've got to isolate the source to prevent it from spreading. And what they're doing now, where they're just screening for fever, we're seeing that you may not have a fever at the time. And that virus incubates, meaning you're infected, and it can take 2 or 3 weeks before you show a symptom. And if we wait until people show symptoms, then you see what happens. You've got to backtrack and try to find all their contacts.
It just doesn't seem that this administration's really, I mean, I'm not saying they don't take it serious, but it has been politicized. Why aren't we just saying, all right, nobody coming into the country until we have this figured out? I mean, Portland's a sitting duck.
Right.
I mean, we could get it in Portland really.
That's right. That's right. I don't know why. They've turned it into a political issue. I mean, we can have our workers go back and forth, our healthcare workers go back and forth, but not limiting non-essential travel just makes no sense at all.
You think Oregon is prepared for it? I mean, OHSU, others, do you think we're ready?
Well, I know at Legacy and the other, the hospital I work at, Emmanuel Hospital, I know that they're all trying to get ready. And we have had infectious diseases, contagious diseases before. We do have isolation rooms. I think the key is preventing it from getting here as much as possible, and then not having to backtrack and try to go back and find every contact which someone gets here.
From your medical connection, is there a serum that works or kind of works?
I understand that there is a treatment or vaccination that can be used, but right now what you have to do is just support the victim when they get sick, support the patient when they're sick.
Okay. We got a lot more questions.
Yes.
Dr. Monica Wehby's with us today. She's Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate representing Oregon. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back with Dr. Monica Wehby. She is a Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate representing the state of Oregon. She's up against sitting Senator Jeff Merkley. We're down to the last few days before everybody turns in their ballots, and you're hot on the trail.
Yes.
Have you been in all 36 counties?
We've been everywhere more than once. More than once.
So what have you learned from this experience so far?
Oh, gosh. I will tell you, in retrospect, one thing that I would have done differently would have been trust my instincts more. Because I think sometimes we're not as aggressive in doing what we want to do because, you get talked out of it or whatever. But I think that would be one thing I would have done more so. But one thing that I learned is that the way things just spin, being a doctor, I'm used to living in a world of truth and reality and facts. and it has been really funny to see
Did
this.
you know you were that bad of a person?
I had no idea. This is what I was going to say. You have there's Merkley's Monica, where I'm a complete caricature of who I am. You'd never know I'm actually a very nice, wonderful person. But things get spun out of control. We were talking a second ago about the debates. He was saying we didn't want to do any debate. We were negotiating 5 debates. We wanted to do 5 televised debates. He would only do the one, but somehow it got spun onto us as being the ones who didn't want to do it. I mean, things like that is just crazy.
I can't understand that.
Yeah.
I've been a victim of that myself.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but I think as people are finding out a little more about who I am and what I stand for and who I really am, that they're coming to our side. Because just look at the way things are going. The economy's a disaster. We've had more people go on food stamps than find a job in the last 6 years. Merkley says he's a champion of the middle class, but everything has gotten worse for our middle class. $3,000 a year less per family since 6 years ago. And unemployment rate in Oregon is high, over a percentage point higher. Medford, very high, 9%. And we've got to turn this around. But the rich people, the well-connected, the cronies, love Senator Merkley's policies, because 95% of the wealth has gone to that top 1%. So for all of his talk, and for all of his and Obama's talk about, oh yeah, things are turning around, well, people don't buy that because they're not seeing it.
Well, and they're not feeling it.
Right.
All right, let's talk about some issues that if you became senator, I mean, we are in this incredible war on terror.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be going well. I don't know what our policy is. Can you tell me what the policy?
No, because we don't have a policy.
Okay.
We don't have a coherent foreign strategy, and that is the problem. We don't have one, and we're very reactive. And so everything, and you see over and over again how this administration is caught by surprise. They're always caught by surprise by everything. Yeah. ISIS, IRS scandal, NSA, everything surprises this administration. What we're doing now with terrorism, Obama calling the ISIS the JV team. I mean, clearly he has no idea what's going on out there.
If it looks like it's a real possibility the Republicans could take the Senate.
I hope so.
And that's leaning in that direction.
I hope so.
And if you're elected, you'd be one more vote there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, the president seems to be, it's possible that you could have a Republican-controlled House, a Republican-controlled Senate, and a president that could go into kamikaze mode and legislate by executive order. Immigration being one of them, amnesty. He's now, you probably have seen all the headlines. He's talking about a green card for 30-some-odd million people.
Right.
How would you fight that? How would you shut this guy down?
Well, see, I think that's a real problem when you start doing everything by executive order, because it's all just going to unravel at some point. And I think this is a problem that we're really seeing with Obama, is that he really has a hard time working with anybody. And that is a huge problem that we have now in our government, is people can't work together. This is the most polarized things have ever been. Of course, Jeff Merkley is a poster child for polarization, voting 98% of the time with his party and being rated the most extreme senator in the Senate. He's just poster boy for that. And then, perfect example of that is of this polarization is his part in the IRS scandal. He was one of the 7 senators that wrote that letter to the IRS asking them to investigate groups based on their political beliefs. And then he turns around and feigns, oh, I just can't believe they would do that. Well, they were responding to his request to do that. And I don't think Oregonians would be very proud to know that about their junior senator, that he was using a federal agency to target groups that disagreed with him. And
I mean, that's almost impeachable stuff.
I know. I'm telling you, it's terrible. And I know. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of some of his attacks. But that's what he does. They try to silence their opposition. They try to vilify their opposition. You'll see if you look at his ads and things, he can't discuss the issues. It's all about vilification and attacking the opponent because he can't stand on his record.
The 3 hated letters in the United States is IRS.
Yes.
Okay, and if you've ever been the victim of an audit, you know what I'm talking about. What I find so interesting is that those arguing this case have never made a payroll. They haven't got the foggiest idea what it is to be in business. And this stuff is going on. Would you be in favor of a simple tax, a fair tax, a flat tax? I mean, how could we tell the IRS go away?
It would be nice if we could, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And I tell you, I think that we've got to make a much more fair and flat tax code. You know, it's 72,000 pages, our tax code.
Yeah.
And when
Did you read it?
my daddy was a CPA, an accountant, and but it was 72,000 pages, and when you've got that many exceptions and loopholes. The people that can afford to have the tax attorneys and all the CPAs are the ones who benefit, not our middle class, working class people that can't afford to have that done. And that's a big problem. I think we need it to be more fair, more flat, without all of these loopholes.
Would you vote in favor to continue the investigation?
Of the IRS?
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's clear that groups were targeted, and they just keep seeming to. I mean, can you imagine telling the IRS when they want your records to say, "Oh, gee, my computer crashed, so you have to let me go"? I mean, we're supposed to let them slide with all this simultaneously crashing computers all over the place, right? Really?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, right.
They don't treat us quite that way, do they?
No, they don't. What about Benghazi? Would you vote in favor of keeping that investigation going?
I think we still have not gotten to the bottom of what's happened there. I think we still have not solved this issue.
What is your position on the United States' relationship with Israel?
I think that we do have to support our ally, our major democracy out there in the Middle East, and it's clear that there's a lot of tension, between the countries there with Netanyahu and Obama. I think the big problem with this is that this whole thing that's going on in the Middle East is our allies don't feel like they can trust us. Our enemies don't fear us. And when that happens, everything starts to unravel. Drawing red lines that we don't back up, and not being there to support, at least making it clear that there's support for our ally.
Would you think that Israel's enemies are our enemies?
I think in most cases, yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it would be a no-brainer, but
Yeah,
we seem
absolutely.
to be running away from them for some reason. At least this administration does.
Well, this administration seems to be running away from everything. Again, they're very reactive. And it seems to me that their foreign policy, Obama, which is all rubber stamped by Jeff Merkley, since he agrees 98% of the time, all of their foreign policy is very reactive and very withdrawn. And so we are not being the world leader that we need to be. And when there's a vacuum in leadership, somebody else is going to step up and fill it. I mean, we're seeing it with Putin, and we're seeing it with the situations in the Middle East.
All right, I only got a few seconds left. I'm going to let you sell me on yourself. Or not, well, actually our audience.
Well,
no, but I think you've been in this for a while.
Right.
It's been a real experience for you,
It has.
obviously, in education.
It has.
And it appears with what's going on nationally and what's going on now at the state leadership, this would give you some real momentum. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what your own polling shows, but I've heard you're moving up.
We're doing very well. And I want people to get out there and vote, because this election is tight and it's going to swing on who gets out to vote. Right. And the Republicans are a big tent party. We may not all agree on every single aspect of everything, but we have got to stick together and get out there and win this election. And I think I can summarize it best by saying, if you like the direction things are going, if you like that our incomes are dropping, that prices are going up, that our world is much less safe and secure now, if you like that direction, then Merkley's your guy. But if you want to change direction, if we want to start growing jobs, start growing our economy, get our healthcare system fixed, get people back working in the woods again in our timber counties, make our world safe and strong, stop running our foreign policy by polling, which is what Obama keeps doing, just polling data directs his foreign policy and his military exercises rather than truth and what needs to be done, and listening to experts like our military experts. If you like that direction, then Merkley's your guy. If you want to change things, and get things going again, I'm your girl.
Dr. Monica Wehby, how do they get a hold of you if people want to correspond with you?
Go to our website, Monica for Oregon, F-O-R, monicafororegon.com. We really need their help with volunteers, phone calls, door knocking. Get out and vote.
And here you are, down to the last week.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, there you go, Dr. Monica Wehby. And yep, 1 week from today is Election Day. So if you got your ballot still sitting around the house, do your civic responsibility, take time, pray over that, fill it out, and get it in. All right, coming up next, how normal is normal? And when it comes to being a Christian, well, we'll talk about that.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Hi, welcome back. And our special guest in the studio today is Josh Kelley. He's formerly a pastor, but now he's traveling the whole country promoting his new book, Radically Normal. You don't have to live crazy to follow Jesus. And here's a picture of the book. You may want to look for it in the bookstores. Radically Normal. The first thing he does is something radical, and he takes his family and sticks them in a car and starts driving.
Yeah, yep.
Welcome, good to see you.
Well, very good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pastored for 15 years.
Yep.
And wrote a book. Why?
Yes. It's kind of the book I wish I had when I grew up, because I was one of those really good Christian kids. You know, I literally did not know what pot smelled like until last year. Wow. And being from Washington State, that's quite an accomplishment. Yeah. But I don't regret that I was a good kid. I didn't do all the dumb, destructive things that all my friends did, and that's good. I don't have those wounds on my soul that they have. Uh-huh. But what I didn't know is the further I tried to get away from being the bad kid and more towards being the good kid, you know, there's like this cliff of destructive sins that the church always warns people about. Well, I didn't realize there's another cliff over here called self-righteousness, legalism, spiritual pride. And so even though I was avoiding the destructive sins, I was falling off of the legalism cliff. And I actually had this real attitude about me where I knew I was the best Christian in my youth group. I would gauge all the other Christians like, oh yeah, they're spiritual, they're not so spiritual, I'm better than them. Wow. And no one warned me, you know, and it's because I was trying to be a good Christian, but that became my thing, was being a really good Christian. And so it's the book I wish I would have had that said, you know what, you can be over-righteous. And that's a strange thought. You can be over-righteous, but that's what Ecclesiastes says, is do not be over-righteous. Why destroy yourself?
So what happened to you? What made you think, wait a minute, whoa, wait a minute here. I'm as bad on the good side as being bad on the bad side.
A lot of that was meeting a gentleman when I was around 12 or 13, a guy, I call him Radical Randy in my book, because we don't want to get sued by using his real name. But he kind of overdid me in being the radical guy. He dressed in a very outdated three-piece suit, had a big cross, spoke in very spiritual terms. You know, if you said, how are you doing? He'd say, oh, blessed, brother. And the more I hung around him, the more I was afraid that that's what I was going to have to look like to be a good Christian. And I didn't want to look like that. I was kind of afraid, do I have to be weird like that? And that's when I first started to notice, wait, maybe the radical side, there's something to it, especially when a couple of years later, I found out he had an affair and left his family. And I've noticed how often the people who really look super spiritual, who are those radical figures, they're frequently the ones that are going off the deep end spiritually. Whereas the people who look just like good, normal Christians are filled with the fruit of the Spirit. And that's when I really started to wonder, wait, was I wrong about what Christianity looks like? Is it supposed to be really radical, or can it look fairly normal? And so I came up with this expression, radically normal, to describe wholehearted, radical devotion to God lived out in very normal ways. That you don't have to be a missionary to follow Jesus to really be obeying him.
Did you consider yourself relevant to the loss? I mean, sometimes, there's a fine line between being an evangelist and being a pastor. I mean, you were a good kid in between, but were you relevant?
I didn't even think the world at that age was something to be avoided. So I didn't. Being relevant was not something within my vocabulary. I'm actually 40 years old, so you were talking. This is in the late 80s, early 90s, and so this whole discussion of being relevant wasn't quite as big of a deal in the church. So I didn't even think that way. I went to Christian skate night. I only listened to Christian music. So the idea of being relevant to the world almost seemed like a little compromise. And so it took me a while to kind of figure out how to integrate our faith in daily Christian life. And it's not that, I had good parents. They weren't legalists. They were just trying to figure out how to do it right, just like the rest of us. But in my own, I just basically, that became my spiritual pride. That's how I felt good about myself.
Did you consider yourself self-righteous?
If you think you're self-righteous, then you're probably not. If you think that you're doing, I just thought I was a really good Christian kid. And it just took a while to realize how much my identity was in being a really good Christian.
So what's normal to you now?
Normal is basically living out the life that God's called you to have. So like, you say, I'm with my family, we packed ourselves up in a minivan, we're driving around the country for a year. Doesn't sound that normal, but it's what we want to do. We're excited about this. There's challenges, there's frustrations, but we're excited about it. So it seems normal to us. Likewise, I have a lot of friends who are missionaries, and they want to be missionaries, so it seems normal to them. They hope God doesn't call them off of the missionary field. And what's radical in the bad sense is when you don't want to be a missionary, you don't want to go on a trip around the country, but you do so because you think that God must want you to. And you're doing it to look more spiritual. You're doing it to be live by faith. So again, it's normal is living out the calling God's given you, which can look very different if God calls you to be a pastor, a Starbucks barista, a parent. It looks very different.
Where do you think this is leading you? I mean, you were a pastor for 15 years,
right?
Involved in church work. You saw somebody you didn't want to become.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And now you're in a minivan driving the country. I mean, that's pretty radical.
It is really crazy.
Where is this leading? Where do you think God's telling you to go here?
The part of pastoral work that I really enjoyed and did the best is teaching, studying God's Word, preaching, the communication. I'm not a great counselor. My basic idea of counseling is telling someone to stop being stupid.
Yeah.
Read Proverbs and do what it says. So I'm not that guy. Instead, I study the Word of God and love it, communicate it hopefully well through a lot of stories and things like that. So my passion is changing to being a communicator, a speaker, a writer. I'm being told by some folks it's a pretty good book, so we'll see how it does. But that's really, if I could have what I really think I want and what I think God's calling me to, be an author and speaker with a pastoral heart.
All right, you're this ideal Christian kid, a young person, now a young adult, manhood. Did you ever go through a tough time? Did you ever suffer?
Suffer, yes. I never fell away from the faith, but I've had lots of different things of hardship. And hardship are one of the most important things for teaching us lessons that you can't. There's no other way around. One really big one is about 3 years ago, our church hit a financial crisis, and I had to go part-time, become bivocational, so full-time pastor, and took a job at Starbucks. That was a very hard time in my life. And it really forced me to reevaluate. And it's basically the backbone of this book. I tell a lot of stories from my time at Starbucks because that's when I really had to evaluate what does it look like to live for God. Because it felt so unspiritual to be sweeping a floor, to be making a $4 latte. And so when I had to really come to grips with my idea of what it meant to serve God in day-to-day life.
Wow, that's and God used that.
He used it hugely to the point where now I finally get that I'm not a better Christian when I'm being a pastor than when I'm being a Starbucks barista. They're two different ways of doing the same thing. I'm better gifted at being a pastor perhaps than being a barista, but they're both. But for another person, God may call them to be a barista, and that's where they can honor God the best there.
You say a couple things in the book, that God shouldn't be your only happiness.
Yeah.
I want you to explain that, and then safe practices. But let's do it. What do you mean by God not being your only happiness?
When I say, it's a quote from the book, God shouldn't be your only happiness, not because he's not capable of being your only happiness, but because he doesn't want to be. The Bible is filled with expressions and even commands to enjoy the things of this earth. The Bible is all about joy. It's all about happiness, and you don't want to divvy into what's happiness, what's joy. Just generally, God wants us to find delight in himself, but also in the things he's given us. And if we have this idea that the more we love God, the less we care about this earth, we're misreading the Bible. The Bible, delight in the wife of your youth, talking about enjoying a conversation with a friend, a good meal, delighting in the harvest, delighting in God's nature. These are things that he invites us to enjoy. And so if we're enjoying these things of the earth properly, we're not being less spiritual than when we're worshiping.
So serving somebody a hot latte is a good thing.
It can be a really good thing.
Yeah.
And for me, it really was. And it was a good thing. But also enjoying a good latte. So, the pumpkin spice latte just came out, and that's always super popular. And, being up here in the Northwest, when it's rainy, it's cloudy, and you have that day, and you just get your pumpkin spice latte, and you're sipping on it, and it's just that nostalgic feeling, to enjoy that as a godly thing is good.
You talk about safe practices. What do you mean, and what are they?
Safe practices, I'm talking specifically about money. Money, as humans, we tend to go to extremes. Christians tend to go to extremes. So the two extremes within Christianity is either one, try to make as much money as you can and spend it all on yourself. The other extreme is to think that the most godly thing you could do, possibly do, is to give all your money away and live on nothing. Well, God may call some people to do that, but in general, what God calls the average Christian to do is to be blessed, to be a blessing. I'm not talking about like this a prosperity gospel that if you're righteous, God will give you lots of money. I don't mean that. But whatever God gives us, we're to enjoy, but also to bless other people with it. And when it comes to money, we just have a hard time finding this medium of being able to have, but to give. And so when I talk about safe practices, basically how can God give you money, give you your daily income, and you use it well and you enjoy it without either becoming a hoarder, without becoming selfish, and without feeling guilty for having money.
The book is called Radically Normal. There it is, and it's put out by Harvest House Publishers. So you may want to check it out at Evangel or Christian Discount Books or online. And Josh Kelley, check it out. I think you're going to find this to be a real practical resource. Glancing through some of the things here, you kind of hit on all of it.
I really try to. I try to show here's how you can live a normal, godly Christian life that enjoys this life properly, but delights in God more than anything else.
Well, legalism and worldliness.
Yeah.
I want to take some time and stick my nose in there. How did you balance that? Because obviously you were in legalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Balancing legalism and worldliness is a lot like the same two cliffs of destructive sins and self-righteousness. And there's somewhere in between. And the way that we really get into legalism is that we have we set up these fences, these extra rules to try and keep us safe from destructive sin.
You end up serving that, not God.
You do. And if the rule becomes you can't watch any movie that's greater than a PG rating, well, that becomes a rule that maybe works for you, but when you think that it's bad for a Christian to watch an R movie, that may not be your business to say. And that can be a touchy subject. I talk a lot about entertainment in there to justify that biblically.
All right, Radically Normal, Josh Kelley, check it out. Thanks, and
thank you very much, Perry.
Best to you and your family as you travel.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
It sounds like you got it planned out pretty well. You're here now, and you're going south for the winter.
Exactly. But we're looking for places to speak along the way, and just hoping God opens up doors. So
That's
we're excited.
Wonderful. Well, blessed to you. And again, Radically Normal. Check it out. Put out by Harvest House. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. Hey, delighted to have with us Scott Jorgensen. He's the author of Conversations with Atiyeh. Now, he's no stranger to politics himself. He's been a staffer for a senator, and but he wrote this book about the late governor, Vic Atiyeh, who was the last Republican governor that the state has seen. And nice to see you, Scott. What made you take this one on?
The whole project started about a year ago. I'd been reading a lot about Oregon history and started with Tom McCall and Mark Hatfield.
Wow.
And realized that there's a lot more that can be written about Oregon's history. And I started thinking about, here's a guy who was our last Republican governor. It's been about 30 years. He's still around. What could I learn from him?
Yeah.
So I set about making that connection and getting the words of wisdom directly from him.
So, was he... obviously, you got in to see him. Was he open to the whole idea of what you were trying to do?
Yes, and he was very accessible at that point in time, and I made it easy for him. We did most of the interviews at the coffee shop inside the Fred Meyer next to his place. So he'd come and we'd chat for an hour, and then he'd go and do his grocery shopping. And in fact, that's what he was doing the last time I saw him.
Wow. All right, so what did you get out of this?
What I got was, leadership is something that we've been writing about since mankind first started writing. It's all over the Old Testament and even well before that. And yet here we are thousands of years later and we're still writing about it. But the most common sense, basic principles still apply today just as much as they did back then. And that was what I really wanted to get across in this book, was here is words of wisdom being passed down from one generation to the next.
Now, he would come into the Capitol once in a while, not often, but he was there for a couple of the opening sessions and things like that. And he tried to make himself accessible. Did you see anybody glean from him besides yourself? Were people taking advantage of him and his wisdom and his experience?
Well, I think that Representative Dennis Richardson, who's running for governor now, had certainly learned a lot from him. In fact, there's pictures in the book. Representative Julie Parrish, a friend of mine from West Lynn, did a campaign kickoff event back in April, and Representative Richardson was there and I was there, and so we all got to gather around and spend that precious time with him. We didn't know at the time that it would be as precious as it was.
Yeah. So, any surprises talking to him?
There was a few. He talked about, our very last conversation was about campaigning because it took place on Memorial Day right after the primary elections. And he had a very good volunteer network throughout the state. He said that he had only hit doors once in Albany, and he basically ended up in the middle of a fight between neighbors, right? So he goes and hits a door, talks to the neighbor, and he says, oh, well, don't talk to the guy next door, he's a drunk. Yeah. And so here's these neighbors fighting, and he handled it, very professionally, like you would expect him to.
Wow. Did he enjoy being governor?
He did, but it wasn't the be-all, end-all of his existence. And that's one thing I'd really like to get across.
Who was he then?
He was a good man, a friend, a neighbor, but more than anything, he was somebody that other people looked to for leadership. His start in politics was actually as a student at Washington High School in Portland, and it wasn't anything that he sought out. Other students nominated him for it, and he ended up doing it. And the same thing happened many years later when he ran for the legislature. It wasn't because he had spent years planning on running and plotting and saying, okay, what can I do to build my resume to look good for when I do? Yeah. But people had approached him and said, well, you should run for the legislature. So it wasn't anything that he sought out.
Did he feel accomplished after his tenure in the governorship?
He did, and my biggest takeaway from all of this was that he felt very good about his life and his legacy and the decisions that he made in this life.
What could you pinpoint that would be Atiyeh in the state overall?
We see a lot of it around here, actually. He worked really hard to expand our industries. He was governor in the late 70s and early 80s during terrible economic conditions. And the timber industry was crippled at that point by the double-digit interest rates that kept the housing market from doing anything. So he set about doing trade missions to Asia, and we now do a whole lot of trade with Asia. The vineyards that we see popping up around us and all the hillsides around here, he had encouraged that industry. Our tech industries that are now some of the largest employers in this state, those are all hallmarks of his legacy.
Where can people get a copy of your writing?
It's on Amazon.com.
Okay.
And I'm appearing tonight at the Josephine County Republican Get-Together at Black Bear Diner in Grants Pass at 6 o'clock. Okay,
and wisdom learned from the late governor. Did he enjoy public life? I mean, he didn't necessarily seek it like you're saying he was kind of pushed into it. Did he like it?
He did. I didn't ever get the impression that he... And that was part of why he was so accessible. Vic Atiyeh, at the end of the day, liked people, and people liked Vic Atiyeh, and you could see that in his interactions with people. I will always cherish, because I'd bring my little 6-year-old son with me on some of these interviews, and he would always ask, when do we get to see Vic Atiyeh? In fact, the front cover photo is him holding my son's hands like this, and that goes with the main theme I wanted to have for the book. Here's me passing wisdom on down to you. Wow. They were actually doing a hand slapping game, right? And I just happened to capture it at that perfect moment in time. And I knew right there and then, that's the front cover shot.
That's wonderful. Now, you never got to finish the interview.
I wanted to do at least one more. And the very last question I was going to ask him was, how ultimately do you feel about your legacy? But in a way, I already knew, because talking to him, you could tell that he felt great about his legacy, and he had every reason to.
Wow. So, of all the things, Victor Atiyeh, the late governor of the state of Oregon, in fact, the last Republican governor of the state of Oregon, hopefully that will change come Tuesday. But nonetheless, what was your biggest takeaway from him?
My biggest takeaway is that it is possible for somebody to be in politics, to stand with their principles, and to not have to stoop. You know, you hear so much about the negativity and nastiness, and I imagine you're getting a lot of that down here right now with some very hotly contested races and negative ads going back and forth. But a good friend of mine, Pat Kelley, local attorney in Grants Pass, he told me once, always take the high road and give people the benefit of the doubt, because nobody will ever be able to take that approach against you. And that was the approach that Victor Atiyeh took, and it worked for him. And it is possible. And that was my biggest takeaway, because it's so easy when you're working in politics to get caught up in the negatives, but it is possible to be able to feel good about what you do at the end of the day and make a positive difference without resorting to all of that.
You've been involved. You've served as an aide to my son, Jason. But what did you take from that? What did you take from the process? I mean, because it can get very contentious. And how would a Victor Atiyeh survive today, as contentious and polarizing as things are?
Well, the thing about Governor Atiyeh is that through most of his service in the legislature and as governor, he had Democratic majorities. In fact, I asked him, what was your fondest memory of serving in the legislature? And we're talking about a 20-year time period. He said it was in the days of the phone booth caucus, where there were so few Republicans that they could literally physically all fit into a phone booth. And he said there were many reasons for that. You know, I've worked in the legislature in the majority, I've done it in the minority. He was in the super duper minority, and that was his fondest time. But you get to really know how the process works. Most of the work gets done in committee, and they were able, even though there was only 7 of them in the whole Senate Republican caucus, they were still able to make their difference, to stop bad bills, to make bad bills better if they couldn't stop them. And a lot of those guys went on to do great things. One went on to be a state treasurer, one went on to be a Supreme Court justice, and they all developed a really strong relationship that he maintained up until the very end. And
I think there's another part of this. We would like to see this return to politics, where, yeah, he served as governor, Republican, even though he didn't have control of the House and the Senate. He was respected. And why do you think that was the case?
Well, Victor Atiyeh, at the end of the day, treated people with kindness.
What a thought.
And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
And that was his approach just in his life. And he grew up in Portland in a very ethnically diverse neighborhood. And so he never saw people as being this or that. And we tend to divide folks anymore. Right. And even, you know, as an operative, as a political operative, they say, okay, well, what messaging do we use to appeal to these people and those people? That wasn't the approach he took. He said, well, what can we do to appeal to everybody?
This is fascinating, and I think it's a piece of Oregon history. You may want to get a copy of it. Where can people get a copy of it?
It's on Amazon.com.
Amazon.com. Wisdoms learned from the late governor, and conversations with Victor Atiyeh. And Scott Jorgensen is the author. What do you want to do next? I mean, is there a follow-up to this? I mean, you want to do one with Kit Hopper?
Well, I would be open to doing a similar project with former Governor Kulongoski, because he had a really fascinating life. And my personal dealings with him, I always found him to be a very kind man. Yeah, I've been working.
I did too. I mean, I met Governor Kulongoski on several occasions. He was fascinating. I mean, I may not agree with all of his policies. That's not the point. The point was, I thought he was coming at it as clean as he possibly could for what he believed in.
Yeah, he was an orphan. He served in the Marine Corps, and his resume was very impressive. So he's led a very impressive life.
Do it, and then we'll have you back.
Oh, that'd be great.
Nice to see you again. And tonight you'll be where?
I'll be at the Black Bear Diner in Grants Pass at 6:00 p.m. for the Josephine County Republican get-together.
Okay, and take a look at the of his writings there. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.